Hi, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection of humans and technology. My name is Guthrie, and I am here with Susan.
Hello,
Susan.
Hi.
And we are going to talk about lots of fun technology stuff, mainly technology curves. I think that's the topic for today. So first, before we start, if your homework for today is to tell another person about the podcast. It's free and we don't even have ads, so there's no reason you shouldn't recommend it to everyone.
And if you want extra credit, rate us on iTunes or Overcast or wherever it is you listen to this podcast.
Yeah. Okay, so today we're talking about technology curves, and essentially what that is people have tried to take theories of technology, broad swaths about various aspects of technology, and say that each technology, for example, like augmented reality, goes through common patterns and similarities.
In terms of I'm especially interested in
like a path
in adoption curves, or just this started when I asked you the question, why is it that we humans seem to adopt some technology really quickly and others we're really resistant to, and why is it that different technologies have such a different pattern? And you said they don't.
Right. So first, really, this is the poli-sci, the political science of technology. So I don't know how familiar like I said, as we talked before we started, I asked if you knew anything about political science.
And I told you I started college majoring in it, but that didn't last very long. So I know a little bit about political science, not a lot.
So I'm an econ major, and so we kind of get along with poli-sci majors, but not really. But
I didn't think anybody got along with poli-sci majors.
I think especially poli-sci majors,
if someone's a poli-sci major, I bet we're going to hear from them.
I took a lot of poli-sci classes.
You
did? Yeah, I was thinking about being a poli-sci major, but wow. I mean, econ and poli-sci are they're in the same ballpark.
Why? Why do you say that?
Well, one's about the economy and the other's about the economy, but actually is backed by science.
Dare I ask which one is which?
So political science is kind of like, you look at these patterns and you look at how the world is structured, right? And how humans do things. And then you try and create artificial structures around those. So the example is, right, so like there's all these, so diplomacy is just two countries talking. That's all it is. It's not like an atom. It's just kind of a made up thing.
Yeah. That
we humans made up. But, as a poli-sci, person would do, they'd look at it as like, okay, well, they create categories, right? So you have your soft diplomacy, your hard diplomacy, there's like, theories of comparative power, and like each of these little schools of thought about why the world is the way it is.
Okay.
And so these little technology curves are very much the same, where people look at technology and they go, well, why, is there an overarching theory that explains adoption rates or explains how excited something is? And there is. People have come up with these sorts of things.
Are they? Well, okay. So I have a bunch of questions.
Uh-huh.
Are there different technology curves? Are some technology adoption curves? Are some more accurate than others? And do they? I mean, so can we?
I'm not going to talk to you about accuracy because that's an economics question. I can't answer that, but I can. But let's talk about some of the different curves, okay?
But you are an economist, so I was hoping you could answer this.
Well, that's what I said. This is the political science of technology. This wasn't the economics of technology.
Okay, go ahead. Talk about some of these curves. First of all, is it true that do you really think it's true that adoption of technology is pretty much the same, no matter whether we're talking about people buying electric cars or people getting on the latest social media software?
Let's back up and explain a couple things.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm getting my graphs up here. So
which we can't see.
No, I know, and that's going to be really fun. But it's pretty. But I can explain it pretty easily.
Okay.
So when we talk about technology, I'm not saying that every technology goes through the same place at the same time. It's not like they all follow each other exactly.
Okay.
But it's kind of more like a butterfly, right? Like there are these phases you go through, right? And then and then you get up to the point, and then you're in the metamorphosis, right? And then you're a butterfly, right? Like it kind of like goes through this progression.
So you're saying the stages are basically the same.
The stages, every technology goes through the same
how
stages.
How long each stage is?
Yes.
And they always go through in the same order?
Yes.
Okay.
So here's the first theory, okay?
Okay.
It's called the technology adoption curve.
Okay.
Everett Rogers did this in his book Diffusion of Innovations.
Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so for those of you there in
podcast land,
I am describing a bell curve.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
And so
you assume everybody knows what a bell curve is.
What is a bell curve? Now, so this is good. So one of us here actually taught statistics on the collegiate level. I wonder who that was.
I don't know. Who was it? It was me.
Yeah, it wasn't me. Yeah. So you.
Oh man! Now you're gonna put me on
explain
the
a bell
spot.
curve to the audience, Miss Professor.
The bell curve is named after Alexander Bell. That's not true, but I just couldn't help it. Okay, I'll stop being silly. The bell curve is a curve that is shaped like a bell.
With a flat bottom.
Has
and
a
a
flat bottom,
top.
and then it rises pretty steeply.
You could also call it a hill curve.
A hill curve, and then
where
it comes.
It starts low, and
starts
then you go
level,
up.
and then it starts to incline, and then it inclines really fast and goes all the way up to the top, and then it comes down really fast, and then it also does another leveling off,
tapering off.
Yeah. And now there can be all kinds of variations on the bell curve. Like it could go level for a really long time and then go all the way up and all the way down really abruptly.
Hey,
yeah.
Can I ask you another question that's very related to this?
Yeah.
What's a standard deviation?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I can answer that question, and I will.
know you can.
And I will in a moment. Let me finish talking about the bell curve.
Because the length and increase of the hill
has to do with the standard
is
deviation.
Dependent on the standard deviation.
Okay, we'll come back to that. So, so you can have a bell curve that has like the same amount of level stuff on the left side as it does on the right side, or it can have a lot more level on the left or versus the right, or it can be the other way around. You can have a bell curve that rises really gradually, going up to the top of the hill.
Yeah, has a little of a hump and then kind of comes down.
Or you can be really sharp. And so what it's describing, you're describing... it's
an area under a curve.
Yeah, so let's say for instance...
Okay, but let me just...
What?
Say one quick thing.
What?
The technology adoption curve it's a equal bell curve, right? So if you drew a line at the 50% line right in the middle,
yeah,
the area under the curve is to the left is 50%, and the area under the curve to the right is 50%.
It's very even.
So yes, so you could fold it in on each other, and
very symmetrical.
This one in particular, it's a symmetrical bell curve. Not all bell curves are symmetrical, but this one is.
So the idea is that if you were to plot measurements of anything. Let's just say we're going to take measurements of how tall all the children in grade 7 in the U.S. are.
Right.
Okay? And we're going to measure how tall all the children in grade 7 are, and we're going to
Plot that on the x-axis, which is the one that goes from left to right. Right? On the left would be the kids who were shortest.
Right.
Right? Like, I don't know, 3 feet. I don't know how
yeah.
70 are.
And then
right?
and then on the far right would be the kids who are in 7th grade and are 7 feet tall.
And picture this. For each inch, you add a dot. And if there's 2 kids at that inch site, you put a dot on top of each other. Right? So at the inches, say 4 feet, where there's a lot of kids, that will be the highest point
of the hill. Or the curve.
Of the hill.
And if you did that, you'd probably, I would think for height.
Yeah, it might be a little skewed one way or the other, but it'll probably be pretty evenly sloped, right? Yeah. Where there's some kids who are really short, and then there's some kids who are kind of short, lots of kids who are average height, and then, some kids who are pretty tall, and then maybe a couple of kids who are like really tall, right? The other way to think of it is area under the curve. So it's just calculus. But think of it this way. Just think of a hill in front of you, a nice even hill. Okay? If you make the hill flat, right? If you use a bulldozer and you just take out all the dirt, right? That makes the hill, you have a certain amount of dirt. So that's the area under the curve. So let's say, for example, you only take the dirt out of half of the hill, right? That's a certain amount of dirt. You have a certain area, a certain volume, a certain number of things, okay? And depending on what part you take out, that is the kind of, that's the percentage of people in that section, in that percentile.
Now, if you want me to explain standard deviation, here's my example of that. So if we did measure the height of everyone in 7th grade in the U.S.
Though, can we just please make it just like of all adults, because then we're using actual measurements that we can talk about?
Well, no, because I'm purposely going to use that as my
comparison. Okay, yeah, do that then.
Okay, so if we take the height of everyone in the U.S. who's in 7th grade, right? Let's make up some numbers here. Let's say the average height is 5 feet.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true. We're just going to say it is. The average height of everyone in the 7th grade is 5 feet. And let's say that that's the average. However, we have some people who are 3 feet tall, not very many of those, and some people who are 7 feet tall, not very many of those, right? And everyone's going to clump around this, 4 to 5 foot area. If we took each person and measured them, and we got the difference between their height and the average, right? So let's say, Johnny is 4 feet tall, the average is 5 feet tall, so the difference is a foot, right? And let's say Marianne is 5 feet 2 inches tall, the average is 5 feet, the difference there is 2 inches, right? And so we take those for each person that we measure, each child that we measure, we take that difference between their height and the average. So that's called the deviation. It's the deviation from the average. So now we take that deviation measurement, okay? 1 foot, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, 8 inches. We add that all up, and we get the average of those deviations. And let's say we find out that we know that the average height is 5 feet, but the average amount that people deviated from 5 feet is 6 inches.
Okay.
So we now have 5 feet or 60 inches is the average, and we now have that 6 inches is the standard deviation. That's what a standard deviation is. It's the average amount that the people in that population deviate from the average. Now let's say we were not measuring 7th graders. Okay? Let's say we're measuring everyone in the U.S. from babies all the way up to old people.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who's alive and is in the U.S. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, our average height is probably more than 5 feet in that case, right? I don't know what the average height is of people in the U.S., but let's say it's
5'8" for men and 5'2" for women.
All right, and then what would it be for everybody? Let's say it's 5'6".
Yeah.
Let's just say
5'5". Yeah, 5'6", 5'5".
5'6", 5'5". So now we have, the average height of everybody in the U.S. is 5 feet 6 inches tall. But now we probably have a lot more variability, deviation, than we did when we were just looking at the 7th graders. Because we're now going to have babies who are, a foot tall, to maybe 2 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a whole bunch of adults, some of which are, a lot of which are more than 5 feet, right? So we're going to have our average, but we're going to have a lot more variability in that group, a lot more deviation. We can expect our standard deviation for that group of data to be what? More or less than it was for the 7th graders?
More variable.
More variability. So we have, if we looked at the curve of the 7th graders versus the curve of everybody.
The curve would look the same, but the numbers would be much stretched out.
You mean the curve would look the same in that it would
be the same shape.
It'd be the same shape. It'd probably be pretty even, right?
Yeah, right.
But
maybe the numbers...
maybe not though, because, well, it depends. If you had more young people than old people, right, the curve might move one way or another. But it would be more stretched out. It's not going to be as steep a curve.
Let me say something that's just very important, though, about deviation, okay?
What?
The other way to think about standard deviation is that you can think of one standard deviation.
Yeah.
So if you start at the middle, okay, and let's assume that we have a curve that's symmetrical, okay?
Yeah.
If you go one standard deviation to the left and to the right, isn't it, it's 2/3, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't know. You got me there.
I believe it's 33%.
Okay. You've gone a big way.
Yeah. So if you go one standard deviation away from the center, on the left-hand side, it will include 33% of the entire group, right? Okay. 1/3. Mm-hmm. On the right-hand side, it will cover another 33%. Okay. So 2/3 of everyone is always within one standard deviation of the mean. Okay? Mm-hmm. Right? The 2 standard deviations, if I'm not mistaken, is like 7.5%, I think. Yeah. And I don't know the exact number. I'm sorry. Right? So now you're including everyone, and not from not 1/3 of all the people on one side, but that's going to be 48%, like 47.5% on one side, and another 47.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, if, for instance, if we said that the average height of the average 7th grader was 5 feet, and that the standard deviation was 6 inches, I think we said, that would mean that
2/3 of
all the people would
fall within 6 inches of the mean, because 2/3 is one standard deviation away.
They're between 4 foot 6 inches. And 5 foot 6 inches.
Exactly. And then we can say that 98% of all the people fall within 1 foot of the mean, because it's 2 standard deviations away, which is 12 inches.
And 6 feet.
And then we can say that it's like 99.8% of all people fall within 3 standard deviations of the curve. So it's 1 is like a third on one side. Then it's like, then there's like, like 90. It's like 60% within 1, 97.5% within 2, and then like 99.8%.
Okay. Now that we've had our statistics lesson, are we done with our whole? Why are we doing this?
Because it's important to look at this when you look at the technology adoption curve.
All right, so tell us about the technology adoption.
So we're taking that same bell curve that we had, right? Symmetrical bell curve, okay?
Yeah.
And let's think of the little bit 2 standard. So we're on the far left side, right?
Yeah.
Anything that's greater than 2 standard deviations. So these are the little outliers.
Yeah.
On the far left, okay?
Yeah. So these are the people who Well,
let me explain this curve, okay?
Yeah.
On the left-hand side, this is the rate of adoption of adoption of a technology.
Yeah.
Okay? So on the left, no one has adopted it, 0%.
Okay.
And on the far right, now everyone has adopted it.
Oh, so this is not equal. Is it equal?
It's a bell curve.
I see what you're saying. On the far left, no one has adopted it. So
right?
can we give an example of a technology?
No, just pick one. Any technology.
Cell phones.
Okay. So the first so when you go from basically no one, okay?
No one has a cell phone.
Up to 2 standard deviations away. So it's 2.5% of people.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
It's a very small number.
Yeah.
Those are the innovators. Okay?
So these are the people in the labs that are trying out the cell phones.
No. We're talking about technology adoption.
All right.
Okay?
So it exists.
2.5% of America is still like 6 million people.
Okay. So this is when cell phones first came out and
Just hold on.
Yeah.
These are the innovators, okay? They're risk takers who have the resources and desire to try new things even
gadgets.
if they fail.
They want to try the new stuff out.
Absolutely, right?
Okay.
So those are they're called innovators, okay?
Yeah.
So that's everything to the left of 2 standard deviations.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
Now let's go everything to the left of 1 standard deviation, okay? So this is so you add another 13% of people.
Still a small number.
Those are called the early adopters.
All right.
Okay?
Yeah.
They're selective about which technologies they start using. They are considered the one to check in with for new information and reduce others' uncertainty about a new technology by adopting it.
Okay.
Okay? So once you've moved through the innovators and the early adopters, then you hit everything now to the left of the mean, which is the middle. Okay?
Okay.
Which is called the early majority.
Okay.
It's a third of all people. They take their time before adopting a new idea. They're willing to embrace a new technology as long as they understand how it fits with their lives.
Okay.
So I'm probably an early adopter. You're probably an early majority.
Okay. Maybe.
And then the next, right? So 1 standard deviation now to the right of the mean.
Yeah.
Right? These are the people who come later. It's another third.
Okay.
It's called the late majority. They adopt in reaction to peer pressure, emerging norms, or economic necessity.
Okay.
Most of the uncertainty around the idea must be resolved before they adopt.
Okay.
Okay, so...
Yeah. They're finally... everyone else has one. They'll get one too.
Right, so think of someone in your life who is... who didn't get a smartphone until like 3 years ago. Okay?
Yeah.
And then you have the rest of it, right, to the right, which is another 16%, are called the laggards.
Yeah.
They're traditional and make decisions based on past experience. They're often economically unable to take risks on new ideas. They're the people who maybe just got an iPhone last year or still don't have one.
And then you have the people all the way at
the last little standard
in the crevice of the curve
Yeah.
who don't have a cell phone. Well, no. This would only be people who did, though, right? So someone
this is technology adoption.
So there might be some people who...
Yeah.
So these are the people at the very end are the people who don't have one.
And so if you think of... So people to the far right, right?
Yeah.
So that's everyone to the right of 2 standard deviations.
Yeah.
Okay, that's 2.5% of Americans. Again, that's about 6 million people. They're stuck in their ways. They're never going to do it.
Or they don't have the money.
Yeah, whatever it is, they don't adopt the technology. So maybe they never get there. Okay. So that's the technology adoption curve, and it gives the pattern for how each technology then grows. Right? Technology has to go through each of these phases of adopters. So pick another technology.
Well, let's pick one. Can we pick one that's...
Anyone. Just pick one.
Electric cars.
Okay, right? So you had... electric cars... So the thing is that the time frames can be very, very different. Right? So... We'll get to that. But, right, so we had the innovators, right? And the innovators are probably people who, were using, like...
Well, are we talking about all electric cars, or are we talking about hybrids? We're talking all electric.
Just electric, not hybrids.
Yeah.
Okay, all electric, no gas. You probably have people, Ned comes to mind.
No, he doesn't have all electric. He's a hybrid.
People like Ned. Who, maybe in the 90s were trying some weird stuff. Definitely innovators. When the first Tesla came out, the Tesla Roadster, right? Those are the innovators, okay?
Yeah.
And so for the entire history of electric cars have been in the innovator stage.
Right.
We might still be in the innovator stage.
Right.
I would argue that with the Chevy Bolt coming out and with the Tesla Model 3, which is their
supposedly affordable.
No, it will be. So the Chevy Bolt is $37,000 before tax credits. After tax, they'll put about $30,000, which is expensive. But you got to remember, you don't need to ever replace the oil, and you don't need to buy gas for it.
A Bolt with a B.
Yes, the Volt with a V.
Do you want to tell me why they would? Because 2 of the most difficult letters to distinguish auditorially are B as in boy and V as in victory. So why would they label one car the Chevy Volt and the other one the Chevy Bolt when they sound alike? And if you say them quickly, Chevy Bolt, you don't know which one someone has said.
Because they're dumb. If I was doing it, I would have done the E-Volt, but
that sounds evil.
Okay, that's fine. They could market it as evil.
I would have come up with a different word. All right. So anyway, the Chevy Bolt, which is just now as we're recording this
it'll come out next year, as will
September of 2016. So the Bolt is going to be available.
It's a 2017 model car, so
it'll come out at the end of this year. Very soon.
Pretty soon. I think if I
it's all electric.
Yeah, 230-mile range, but we don't know if it's any good. Tesla has been making cars that very consistently get 200 to 50-mile range for years now. And their Model 3, they've been pre-ordering it for a while. It'll probably come out sometime next year as well. So maybe Q2, Q4, sometime next year. So when that happens, people who buy that are probably early adopters. So even though electric cars, the idea has been around for a while. And in fact, the first automobiles way back in the day in like 1910 were actually electric. They
were?
Yes, the first cars were electric. It was actually the invention of the combustion engine that was the revolution. That was a new thing. They didn't have combustion engines, so the first cars were electric.
How funny is that?
Yeah, so like in a different world, instead of this whole thing of oil, they made battery tech better, and we would have you've been using electric cars for forever.
All right, but I have a question.
Yes.
Which is kind of what led us to start talking about this topic anyway. Is this idea... I think we rationalize stuff when we're not ready to, like, all right, so if you ask people,
Well, this is just the first curve we're talking about. There are many other curves. This is just the first one. But you asked about technology adoption.
oh, well, then I want to talk about some of the other curves. But
Okay,
I want
pick
to
an-
ask,
pick
but I
another one.
want to ask a question first, which is,
Uh-huh.
if you some the people who are talking about the Chevy Bolt, you know,
Bolting.
they did some research about, why are people reluctant to go totally electric, and
Well,
I think one of the main things that people talk about is, well, they need the car to be able to go, hundreds of miles before a charge. And yet the research shows that 90% of the time in a given day, or before a charge, we don't go hundreds of miles. We need to go 50 miles. But we think we need more. Right?
Well, I have so much pushback, but you can't believe. But okay, yeah.
You don't believe that data?
Oh, no, I believe the data, but so you're referring to an article that you read that in some ways, right, the idea is, well, people should be buying electric cars, but consumers are stupid because they think they need to use that. I would push back.
Yeah.
And I would say, no, a car needs to be able to go 200, 300 miles. Like a 90%, that's right. Like,
I understand that, because it's interesting, because yes, okay, so on most days, maybe you only drive 50 miles, but when you want to go on the weekend trip and drive 4 hours, you want to be able to do it without you don't want to buy a car that can, it's an interesting point. But when we buy some of these items, and I don't know if it's just the large ticket items or what, we're not buying them for the most frequent use case.
yeah, no, yeah.
We're buying them for
95%
all of our
the
use
time,
cases.
you're not using your car, right?
Right.
It's just sitting in the driveway.
Right, but we still want one, right, just in case. And
Right.
even though we may not drive more than 100 miles a day, the 4 times a year when we're
you
going
need
on
to.
a trip, that's an important part of our view of the car.
And I think one of the most valuable aspects of a car is the ability to just go if you need to.
So,
like, if you need to go somewhere,
yeah,
you can, like that, and I think that's very underrated. But here's the point, okay?
Yeah.
I think the customer is totally right, and you don't have to. And if you want it to last for a long time, it totally can. And I think the reason people haven't really wanted to buy an electric car is because there hasn't been a electric car under $70,000 that was any good. Like, it hasn't existed. Okay, but that will change next year, when you'll have 2 cars that will have both the Bolt with a B and the Tesla Model 3 will get well over 200 miles on a charge. And if you have a Tesla and you go to a supercharging station, you'll be able to charge, you get 100 miles of charge every half an hour. So, right? So, like, worst case scenario is, instead of going to a gas station, you just pull over and, like, have a cup of tea and have some lunch for half an hour, and you can drive for another hour or 2.
So it seems that if you were trying to predict when a particular technology would make it past some of these critical adoption phases, you would need to understand not just this is the phases that all technology goes through in terms of adoption, and standard deviations and all of that, but you'd need to understand that for this particular product, so let's take the car as an example. The car, especially in the US, I don't know if this is true everywhere, is seen as, I mean, it has certain values. It has certain associations. One is convenience. One is freedom. You said the idea that I can get in my car and just go anywhere.
The United States is a very big place.
Right. So I want if I'm going to have a car, I'm getting a car, I mean, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are buying a car because they want it to be theirs. They want to be able to access it at any time. They want that freedom. They want to just go without having to think about, where they have to stop and all of that. They're not taking a train. They're not taking a plane. They want the freedom.
It's groceries,
of the car,
commuting,
and trips,
and road trips. Those are the three use cases.
So if you were going if you were going to put together the critical points in the adoption curve, you should be able to predict that until you don't need special charging stations until it's at this price point, right? Until it goes this many miles, you're not going to go past the, whatever that first level that you mentioned is early adopters or whatever. I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise.
Innovators.
Yeah, you're not even going to make it to early adopters.
But we're in early adopters now. So for example,
for electric cars?
I think we're right on the edge.
Right
when
on
those
the
two
edge.
vehicles.
I
because
agree.
so like the Tesla Model 3 already has 400,000 pre-orders.
Yeah.
So the car hasn't even been announced yet.
Yeah.
And they've already 400,000 people have put down like $1,000 deposit to purchase the car.
Yeah.
Including people I know. So I would say we're between that and the Bolt, sometime next year we will move into the early adopter phase.
But you should and maybe people are already doing this and I just don't know. But for whatever the technology is, whatever the product is or the service, if you've done enough research, you should be able to know when or not when necessarily, but what critical aspects, have to have occurred before you get to the next spot. But is it always so predictable? I mean, I'm going to try and throw a wrench in this.
No, hold on.
What?
Before you do that, let's just look at some other curves that may answer your question.
Okay,
right?
okay. Because we've just been talking about the adoption curve.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other curves.
All right, what other curve? What's the next curve we're going to talk about?
I want to talk about the Gartner curve of expectations. Okay?
Such a great name for a curve.
And this is for emerging tech. Okay? And this one, you have to think of a roller coaster. All right?
Okay.
Where you start at the bottom. And you kind of slowly ching up to the top of the hill.
Up to the top. I choke
right?
up
And then
to
you
the
go
top.
over the top.
Over the top, I go
down
all
you go,
the way down really
and then
fast.
and then you go down, but you don't go all the way. You kind of go down a bit, and then you kind of go back up and go around the curve. All right?
Okay. All right. So there's more than one curve.
There are a lot of different curves. But
No. But I mean, in this particular one,
Yeah.
there's more than one. Because the other one, you went up and you went down and you were done.
Yeah,
but this one, you go up and then you come down.
You go down, and then you kind of go up again a little bit,
okay.
and then you plateau.
All right. So what is this describing?
This describes the expectations of a technology. So on the x-axis, again, as we go from left to right, is time. Right? So,
okay.
So as we move through the roller coaster, we're moving through time.
Through time, okay.
And the y-axis, is expectations.
What do you mean?
The expectations.
Oh, you mean
have.
like
how excited people are?
How excited I am. The expectations I have that this is going to be
awesome and like
cool
change
technology
the world and
okay,
really cool.
all right,
Okay?
all right. And
Right?
what happens?
So you start. The first phase is the innovation trigger.
What does that
Right.
mean?
So there's an innovation that triggers the beginning of the ride. I can stay with electric cars.
Or
So-
driverless cars. you know?
Yeah.
Oh,
sure,
it's going to be this. We now have the capability.
We have a couple prototypes and they're in testing.
Right. And so
Okay.
now I start to get excited.
Yeah, you start to get excited and just builds and builds and builds and builds as the technology kind of matures, all right?
Right. And we see
And
this
then you
test
hit-
and we see that test. Yeah.
And then you hit the peak of inflated expectations, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably where, so that's maybe where we were with driverless cars like a month ago, okay? And that's the tip of excitability, right? Like, this is amazing.
It's going to be amazing. It's
so
going to be
cool.
great. It's almost
Right.
here. I'm going to be able to call up a driverless car.
I'm buying one. I'm buying one today, right?
I'm buying
You have
one.
This, and
Yeah,
now
I
this is
can't
kind of
wait.
lines up with the early adopters, right? So the innovators kind of maybe purchase it in the innovation trigger stage, and then peak of inflated expectations. There's all this hype, and then, oh boy, here we go, and that's when you get the early adopters, okay?
Okay.
And then as the early adopters fill in, you fall down into the trough of disillusionment, which is basically, actually, there are like still all these problems, and it's not
that
as good as
somebody
we
had a
thought.
crash with it and it's expensive.
Yeah,
and
like
they're not going to be ready.
Yeah,
and
virtual reality is actually, it's
You know,
really cool, but really it's just a giant like vomit comet where you just get like headaches and nauseous and like, right? And
Okay.
then,
And then, all right. So now it plummets and nobody wants
and
it.
people, well, no, you're still higher than before, but
Okay.
right, you've definitely taken the steam
People
out of the
don't
balloon.
expect as much out of it.
But then you have the slope of enlightenment, which is the technology matures.
These are great phrases.
Yeah, they're really
The
wonderful.
slope of enlightenment.
Yeah, so the technology matures.
Okay. People adjust their expectations. They realize they kind of do like it, even if it doesn't do everything.
Yeah, but as it matures, it kind of becomes more usable, better. And they're like,
Okay.
oh, this is kind of,
So
this
then it
actually is
goes
pretty
back
cool.
up.
Yeah, and then eventually you hit the plateau of productivity, which is basically, like people, then it becomes a mature technology that people are, yeah, that's pretty cool, So like,
And they just expect. So is that where we
like
are?
the
For
internal
instance,
combustion engine is
Well,
in the plateau of productivity.
what about our cell phones?
Cell phones were still on the slope of enlightenment, I think.
Okay.
I would argue.
Now I'm going.
But different technologies go through this at different times
Yeah,
and different
yeah.
paces. So
Different
like the
rates.
slope of enlightenment for cell phones, it might be like 15 years or like 30 years. I don't know. So I think we're basically in the plateau of productivity for internal combustion engines, but we're still making like advances in the internal combustion engine. People are still like, wow, that's pretty cool. It's been like 100 years.
But I would think that if electric cars really take off, then the internal combustion engine's gonna that expectation curve's gonna go down.
There is one last part of
Yeah,
this.
which is what?
The Cliff of Obsolescence. Which is basically, so you've had your plateau of productivity,
Yeah.
and now something's replaced it, and
Oh.
the expectations kind of decrease as it just kind of becomes
So
obsolete.
what-
So like printed newspapers, photocopiers.
Oh my God! Don't say that. I happen to know someone who is an editor of a printed newspaper, and you're saying.
But
that's-
again, that cliff of obsolescence could be 100 years long. Right? So like interactive whiteboards, maybe we're kind of moving past
yeah,
that. That's probably still in the
interesting.
plateau of productivity. But here's a better example.
What?
Right. So right now, internal combustion engines are on the plateau of productivity.
Yeah.
But in 50 years, when everyone's using electric cars, right, it'll be the cliff of obsolescence, where people just aren't using that technology anymore. Laser or physical media like Blu-ray, right?
Yeah.
So there's the innovation trigger. People were really excited like 5, 6, 10 years, no, maybe
Well,
15 years ago.
How about the cassette recorder?
Yeah, right. So like Blu-rays, right? And then it was the slope of enlightenment.
Yeah.
People were kind of right. Everyone's using Blu-rays for PS4.
Yeah.
We're into maybe the plateau of productivity, but in 10 years, when everyone streams everything,
Yeah.
just
Then
no one is
Blu-ray,
buying physical
who
media
cares,
anymore, and
yeah.
it's kind of obsolete, and so the expectations
So-
would go down.
Are there people out there mapping this for various technologies or
Yeah, of
various
course.
products?
I'm literally looking at a bunch of them that map this exact thing.
But I mean, do they do it ahead of time so that you could, let's say you're a company that's making a particular product or service. Can you get a good handle on, how long it's likely to be profitable and how long that
Let's move on to some other curves.
Oh, we have more curves?
Oh my God, there's so many of these.
All right.
All right, yeah. So there are more curves. Okay. So now I want to talk about the S curve of innovation, and it's called the S curve because it looks like an S.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Now on the on the x-axis,
Yeah.
we have time.
Of course, we always
Again,
have time.
so
Okay.
start in the beginning and move later.
Yeah.
On the y-axis,
Yeah.
we have the technology performance parameter.
Now that doesn't sound as cool as the slope of enlightenment
No, it's not. This is
or the cliff of obsolescence.
yeah. But basically what this is again, this is the kind of rate of how great the technology is. Okay?
What do you mean?
So like driverless cars, right? Where in the
Yeah.
very early stages, it's kind of sucks right now. But you would imagine over the next 10 years, it'll get really good really fast.
Okay.
And then, like, okay, like, or like internal combustion engines, right? There was all this innovation.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of like, all right, we basically tapped it out. There's not, we'll make some improvements here or there, but it's not like all of a sudden we're going to like, cut the amount of gas that a car needs in half like next year,
Well, what does the curve of innovation do that the one about the curve of expectation doesn't do?
Okay, so you got the bell curve of adoption,
Yes.
the Gartner curve.
We had the
That
book, yeah.
that is representing how fast the technology will be adopted.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have that was the bell curve. Then you have the Gartner curve, which
Yeah.
is expectations. That's just how excited people are about a product. That has nothing to do with how good the product actually is.
Okay, that's just excitement.
Right.
Okay.
And then you have the S curve of innovation, which I'm talking
Yeah.
about now,
Yeah.
is the actual quality of the product. Okay, so we're taking humans kind of out of the equation. All right?
Okay.
So in the beginning, you start, it's called the embryonic stage, or at least the graph I'm looking at now, okay?
Yeah.
And it's just the very beginning, right?
Right.
New invention,
Right.
things are, who knows
Has
what's
some
going on,
promise, but we don't know where it's going.
right? And this is maybe as you start to ramp up, okay?
Yeah.
Then you have your expectations of how great the technology is moving up at a steady clip, right?
Okay.
But the technology itself isn't really getting that much better. It's too early. So that's called the technology, and then you hit the technology improvement period, right?
Oh, okay. Where the technology actually gets better.
But the way you got to think of this is it's an S, right? So it's kind of going pretty flat for a while,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it just explodes up,
Yeah.
right? So think of cell phones,
Yeah.
okay? We've had cell phones since the 80s, but like car phones and
Flip phones.
Well, even starting with flip, in that later stage of flip phone when you first
Yeah.
started to get like a camera in there,
Yeah.
right? But like the phones were kind of the same; they weren't that great. And then all of a sudden, in like 10 years, you go from like a Nokia to shoom, we like shot up,
Yeah.
right? We went
Yeah.
through flip phones and camera phones and iPhones and like smartphones.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of basically at the top, where things are still getting better, but it's not like the difference between a Nokia, like snake phone, and an iPhone, what came out within a couple, right? That was when we were in the
Yeah.
huge swing. So when you think of expectations, you got it. So make an S, right? And then draw a diagonal line that cuts the S in half, right? Like
Okay.
you're striking it,
Okay.
right? So if you look at the front half of the S,
Yeah.
that strike you made was expectations. So the expectations grow with the technology,
Okay.
But the quality of the technology doesn't grow linearly, right? So in the beginning, you have these expectations of the technology that go up and up and up and up, but the technology can't match the expectations. And so what you get is you get a period of overestimation. And that's when you hit the trough of disappointment or disillusionment.
Oh, that's a good name.
Right? So, that's from the Gartner curve that I talked about earlier.
Okay.
Right? So your expectations, right, they keep going up, but the technology hasn't caught up to it yet, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, kind of in the middle of the technology improvement period, it zips up, right? We all of a sudden have all these breakthroughs, okay? But the expectations now have been set on this certain path. And at some point, the technology zips above expectations, right? And that, in the best epitome of that, of course, is the iPhone release, right? This is what a smartphone is. Okay, it's got a little screen, it can take some pictures, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, boom, iPhone, touchscreen, future, GPS, all that kind of stuff, right? And when you hit that, then you have, that's the underestimation period, okay? Where everyone's like, wow, like this is way better than
I expected.
Than I expected. This is crazy. Like, I can't believe this is a thing, right? And so that is where you make a ton of money. That's where the money comes in, is in that beautiful underestimation, because then you have a product that's better than what people's expectations of what that product can do is. And once you hit that, now that's when you make tons and tons and tons of money. Yeah. And then after a while, you move into the mature technology period, right? So now you're kind of flatlining, right? And you're making some gains here or there, and there's still money to be had, but it's kind of whatever. Now, eventually, on the tail end, if you think of your strike through, the expectation curve will run into the S again on the back end. And once you hit that, you're into aging, right? Now it's an old technology. Yeah, maybe there's still a market in there somewhere.
So is there a way to manipulate any of this and, make more money by lowering expectations initially, or?
Yeah, sure.
Do people do that?
Yeah, sure. And a lot of problems people have is so you got to balance all these different things, right? So on one hand, you want there's a formula actually that the Verge podcast used to use, that was the hype index, and it was a number you could calculate. That was the hold on. I'm trying to see. I'm having trouble finding the.
Well, anyway, there's a hype index.
Yeah, they talked about the. They kind of talked about, and it was, the question was, how do you. Oh, here we go. Okay, yes, hype, a mathematical equation, right? So the way the way you define hype, okay, hype equals notoriety, okay?
Yeah.
Multiplied by mystery plus exclusivity.
All right, I get that. But what good? All right, so I now know I have a hype index of blah blah blah. What good does that do me?
So the hype index. So hype is important because it will move your technology adoption forward. And the other part we haven't talked about the technology adoption is what people call the gap. And I'm sure you know about the gap.
Yeah, this is like
this is pretty well known in the
yeah, it's like the crossing the chasm idea.
Yeah.
How you get
in
from
startup land.
Yeah, how you get from the early adopters to the point
chasm,
where,
the gap, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So basically, you might have forever these early adopters, right, who are really excited about something, but it doesn't hit mainstream.
Right.
And if it doesn't hit mainstream, then you're not making any money, right? And so what you need to do is you need to kind of cross this.
You need to
gap.
up your hype index.
Maybe.
All right.
So what hype will do, right?
Yeah.
Is it creates buzz, and it may help build a bridge across that chasm,
Right.
and start to trickle into the mainstream.
Right.
So that's what Tesla did, right? Like, it was just kind of a thing, but all of a sudden there's all this hype about the car, and people start paying attention to it. Now, so it's all these curves basically on one plot, right? So you need the hype to kind of cross the chasm, right?
Yeah.
But you also need right. You need so because you want to make expectations high, because you need to cross the gap. So it's almost like you need to build momentum to jump across a cliff, right?
But if you overhype,
yeah. So the higher you, so think of a stunt biker, right? And he's jumping over the Grand Canyon, or he's jumping over a big gap, right?
yeah,
Well, if you're not moving fast enough, you fall into the chasm and you never get to the other side, right? If you go, the best way to go is to go really, really fast and then jump onto a high platform on the other side.
okay,
And that would be, you have a lot of hype, but then your product meets the hype expectation. And you can think of the height of the motorcyclist as the as like satisfaction, right? So in the beginning, there's like, people they have very low expectations, right? But you're meeting those expectations, right? The product sucks, but it's also early and everyone knows it, right? But what you got to do is you got to build all this steam. So height is satisfaction, velocity is, for the biker in this case, velocity would be the amount of hype. Okay? So the biker is going down the ramp, building up speed. Okay? And then all of a sudden he jumps, goes down the hill, going up the hill, and jumps the gap. Right? If you set these really high expectations with all this hype, but then the product itself kind of sucks and you've oversold, now he's like in the middle of the air, he's crossed the gap, but then he like falls really, really far and really, really hard on the other side, right? So then he might just crash and just like explode. But if your pedestal's a little higher up, you cross the gap and then you can kind of keep going on your way.
All right, I have a question though.
Yeah.
I mean, my impression of a startup has this idea, innovative breakthrough product or service. My impression is that they don't that my impression is that these curves and everything else are all applied afterwards to analyze what happened, but are not necessarily, people are mapping the curves, ahead of time and making decisions about the product and how they're, what they're going to do.
I'm sure there are marketing people who do. It's also a lot easier on something that has a little bit of a longer curve.
Yeah.
So if you look like at an app, right? Like the curves for apps, especially with hype, sometimes it's like a week or 2 weeks. Like you're just like flying through these parts of the cycle, right? Where like Pokemon Go, where it's like you go from like innovator to early adopter in like a couple days, or like a day or two, and even by the end of the week, you're into mainstream.
But
right?
Is that
the early majority?
But that's not even predictable. How do we know? Is there any way to know? I mean, just the concept of an app, just the idea that there are apps. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when apps did not exist. I mean, software existed. Yeah. The web existed. Yeah. Websites existed. Apps did not exist. Not really. So just the concept of an app, that happened really quickly. Mm-hmm. I still feel like there's innovations and technology that come at us out of the blue and really take over. But
it's only the blue to you. To the people who are on the ground floor, or if it's something they're really excited about, they've known about it for, a relatively long period of time. Right? That's the whole point, is that what's a product that you're really in tune with, that you're like an early adopter on, or even an innovator?
Me personally?
Yeah. About anything.
I was definitely an innovator and an early adopter of what we now call, for instance, e-learning.
Okay. Right? So to you, the idea that you take a video course online, like, they've been around for forever. You've known about it. You probably know all the major players in the last couple of years, right?
Oh, I was working on this in the 1980s.
Right. So but to someone else who's never done it, all of a sudden they look, and it looked like it just came out of nowhere.
And in fact, it was very slow. Very slow.
Right.
Very slow in terms of technology, very slow in terms of adoption.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. And that's just because I was involved in it, that I saw how the snail's pace it was moving at.
Right. But again, it's right. The way those curves work is that once you start building up steam, and especially hype, like, it's just exponential growth.
Well, and all right, in that example you just gave, the slowness really was a factor of, probably a couple things, but one of them was the technology, which, until we had really fast internet speeds that everyone could access, that was just, keeping it at bay. So
the curve for that mimics a lot more the curve of electric cars. They had it all down, but they were limited by batteries.
By the battery life, yeah.
And so they just couldn't make a good car. And so now we're just at the point where now batteries, like internet speeds, are starting to get mainstream enough and cost effective enough that you can start having all this adoption.
Well, I think this is really fascinating, and I would like personally to study this more. This seems like an interesting intersection between technology and economics and data analysis and marketing and user experience and psychology and behavioral science and everything else.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah. So people can definitely think about, but you can use this for anything. If you're trying to build, any kind of product or service, think about the curves, because we've been talking about technology, but you can use this for any kind of, if you're starting a YouTube channel, right? And you're trying to make it, you're trying to break into the, the mainstream.
Yeah.
Right. You got to build hype to break in, but it's easy when your product is so good that you can live up to the hype without trying, right? But if your product is maybe, is good, but is not like amazing, like nothing anyone's ever seen, it's hard to break into the mainstream. And sometimes the only way to do that is to just have a crazy amount of hype.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right. And then once you're in, then you kind of have more time to buy, and then you're a player, right? And then you can kind of try and compete with everyone else. But the only way to get there is to just ramp your hype up like crazy. And so that's why I think you have a lot of that's why, like, every tech thing these days is like, announcing, we've made the greatest thing in the history of mankind. Technology will never be the same. Announcing the iPhone 7, which is the same as the other one, except a little faster. But we took the courage to get rid of the headphone jack. Right? Like, everything just is like crazy hyped. But that helps really build awareness in the mainstream. So.
All right. Well, I'm gonna study some curves. I may go look at some curves of some of my favorite technology and see what it was like. Can you just before we close here, do you want to just mention again in case people want to go look these up, what the curves were that you were talking about?
Yeah. So just go to Google Images or just search for the S-curve of innovation.
The S-curve of innovation. That was the last one we talked about.
Technology adoption curve.
That was the first one.
Everett Rogers in his book Diffusion of Innovations. That was the first one we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
You have the it's the Gartner innovation curve, I think. What's the hold on. It's like the
That was the one that had all the cool names, like the slope of enlightenment.
Yeah. That's the hype cycle for emerging technologies.
Hype cycle. Okay.
Yeah, that was written in a blog post in 2010 by Gartner.
Okay.
And then I think that's
the ones we talked about.
Those are the ones we talked about.
Well, Guthrie, this has been great fun. And thank you for making me do an on-the-spot explanation of standard deviation.
Yeah, I didn't prep you for that.
And on next week's episode, I will walk you through the analysis of variance.
I would like analysis, an explanation of OLS, ordinary least squares.
Oh, okay. Well, that'll be the episode after the one.
Honestly, I don't exactly remember how to calculate OLS or what it does. It's like you basically, it's like you take, I think you take like and I'm totally on the spot. I think you take like the square root of the standard deviation or something.
Just stop. We'll save that for a future episode when you can get prepared.
We really should do a whole thing on P and T distributions because they're really important. And R squared, and like people don't know what they are.
And lose our entire audience. Okay, we'll do it. We'll sneak it in the middle when they don't know it's coming.
I like saying this stuff because then it makes me sound smart. So.
Well, what do we want to remind people about, Guthrie?
If you want us to speak at your event, email us at info@theteamw.com.
Okay.
We're booking stuff for 2017 now.
We are. Yeah, and we have a little bit of space maybe before the 2016 is done. So
yeah, go to theteamw.com. You can look at our big course list. I'm quite reasonably priced. If you want to book me, Susan's expensive, but I'm very reasonable.
And he's actually very good. He's getting some good ratings in his speeches. So book them now before the price goes up.
Hype. Yeah. Tell this to one of your friends. I don't know.
Rate us on iTunes.
We just want to help people, and we have courses you can check our courses out at courses@theteamw.com. Again, questions and comments, email us at info@theteamw.com, and we'll keep the events coming. Again, if you haven't listened to our older episodes, they're great. Go listen to them. They're generally not time dated, so there's no reason they should be as good as anything else. If you're looking for more content. And this is, it's still pretty early in our podcast history, but this is episode, I think, like 27 or something. So
yeah.
Whew. All right. Susan, thanks.
Yeah.
I will talk to you soon. And to everyone listening, thank you for listening. Bye for now. And I hope everyone has a great week.
Bye.